All right, wonderful film. So for you, there's really two parts to Greta Lee's character. How do you go about crafting both sides of her character?
Well, I think that, the truth is that to always embrace the contradiction of it. Because I think that this is something that is beyond the culture and the language. It is actually so universal, this feeling of who we were when you were 12 and then who we are now. And I think that there is always a bit of it where it's like, well, you're the same as, you and I are not 12 anymore. But there is a part of us that is still 12, right? And I'm sure people who knew us when we were 12, like maybe our parents, whoever, when they see us, sometimes they're like, I still remember you when you were 12. So in that way, there are people and places and time in your life that still holds and takes care of the part of you that forever. So in that way, I think that that's the contradiction of, yes, we are of course no longer 12, it's obvious, but also there isn't a really special thing that when you're with someone who knew you and loves you when you were 12, in some ways you're still 12. So what a funny contradiction. And I think that's really at the heart of how to put together the two parts, right?
How did you track directing the two different actors playing your two different characters?
Well, so you mean
the children and then the adults?
Yes, of course. Well, I think part of it is what's amazing is when the children were being cast, we did a chemistry read, and then the grown-ups, they watched the chemistry read video. And then some of their chemistry, we were wanting to build it around the childlike chemistry. So it's not like a flirting or something like that happens between adults. Sometimes it's just like it works because they're still behaving like children with each other. And that's actually the story that they have. It's not just that they're not suddenly like, oh, we're having a really adult romance. And like, no. This romance was stopped and therefore left in that corner in the streets of Seoul. And that's where the romance lived. And even as adults, that's still where the romance lives. So I think that in that way, that's really what it was, yeah.
One of my favorite parts is both men love one side of her, and they can't reach the other. How important was for you also not to make the men villains? They're not really rivals. They actually would like each other. How important for you not to make one a villain? You just want to keep it that they both shared a love of her, but they couldn't, reconcile fully.
But I think that that's what's true about it. I think you're absolutely right. They know and therefore love different parts of her. So I would talk about it sometimes as both men have a key to this woman that the other guy doesn't have. And in fact, in that moment, John Cale's song comes out and starts playing when it's just Haesung and Arthur, the two men sitting there. And the song is You Know More Than I Know, right? So to them, they both hold on to this woman's they both hold a key to this woman that the other guy doesn't have. And instead of trying to fight each other and wrestle each other for the other guy's key or be like, get out of here, your key's not real, what they're doing is they're saying it's like, actually, when we're both here and when we're both able to coexist for her, only then can she be fully unlocked. And only then can she be loved fully. And actually, because that's the really amazing reason for us to be good to each other and be adults with each other and not, get into a
Our last question is, the ending is so emotional. Of course, she's been holding back her emotions, and we have the Uber ride, the whole tension. How is it directing Greta in that final scene where she finally breaks down emotionally?
Well, I think that some of it has to be about the holding on to it. She's been holding on to it for weeks. She's been holding on to that emotion for weeks, which is a feeling of like, well, because this whole film is about that final goodbye. Right? The final goodbye is like, it's beyond saying goodbye to Haesung, who's a grown-up. It's also saying goodbye to the part of herself that's 12, that she never got to say goodbye to. She gets to have a goodbye that she never got to have. So because of that, this is something that Greta and I are working on for so long, that when it comes to the crying, she's been holding back for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's like, it's very painful. And then I think that when she finally has permission, it was perfect. So to me, that was something where it was like watching somebody completely blossom in this other way. After watching her blossom for weeks as this character, you're watching the character that she is playing open up. And then suddenly there is a complete openness that you see in that scene. And I think that really is about her holding on. And part of the reason why she's holding on is because she was trying to take care of both Haesung and Arthur. She's trying to take care of the men. She doesn't want this to be something that is awful. So part of it is that she's not going to make it be about her crying. It's only when she's alone that she's actually she's then going to allow herself to let go and get to grieve the 12-year-old girl that she left behind in Korea. Yeah.
Well, Obviously, as a teacher, my favorite scene is the opening scene where he interacts with his students. How important for that scene to establish Paul Giamatti's character and kind of set the tone for the movie?
Important. Yeah, I've got to think of something to say.
Well, like the way like interacting with the students, because it was kind of aggressive with the students, but how far did you want to push it and pull it back?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's what was suggested by the screenplay. Then you've got Paul Giamatti, the actor, and he's going to put his own particular spin on it. But, you know, to simplify it, it has a bit of there's a bit of a Ebenezer Scrooge through line, you know, where you start out with the character in one place with a hardened heart, and which you see in that scene. And by the end of the movie, you know, Pharaoh's heart is softened.
It was a beautiful film. Thank you so much. What was the impetus to try to take this very personal experience for you and translate it into a feature film?
Has always been, for 10 years, it has been a personal experience. I am Ukrainian. I am telling the stories of my own community. That is why, for me, it was so important to make sure that this is not just news, that this is not just seen as pictures on the screen, that these are real people and real tragedies. So that's what I want to tell to the audience when I'm showing them a film, that it's still happening, it's happening with real people, and it shouldn't be forgotten because it's so urgent. It's not just about Mariupol, it's about my hometown that is being bombed today as we speak. It's about other Ukrainian cities that were just completely destroyed. And yeah, that is why we have to make sure that this film is seen by as many people as possible.
Now, it's slightly different. A lot of times documentaries are distant from their subject, which is totally fine. You're in the heat of battle, like feeling it. How do you think that contributed to how you tell your story?
I think that's how we have to try to tell these stories of tragedies and in war. We cannot tell them from distance. We can't be just observers because it's about all of us. It's a universal experience, which I hope no one lives through. But to make sure that this not happens again, you need to immerse the audience in this feeling. How is it to be trapped? How is it to be afraid for your life for every second? And it's not an easy experience, but nevertheless, you know, we're humans. We have capacity for this, and it's important.
And it's also an opportunity to speak for the dead.
It's an opportunity to preserve their memory. I feel that I owe this to them. We've been saved by people of Mariupol, and I owe them to make sure that Mariupol is never just a word and in the headlines or in the news dispatches. That it has meaning to it.
So, what inspired you to tell this story?
Well, not obviously, but it was real life, honestly. So I went to school with my co-writer Johannes, and we had a very similar incident in our time in school where we got frisked, and that was like a kickoff for that story.
One of the things I found interesting is the relationship between the teacher and the student that definitely de-escalated. Did you always land on your ending, or did you possibly think of maybe different ways to end the film?
I will be honest with you, I shot a couple of endings. I did shot, I was like, but that's always the thing, I mistrust my own judgment, and I try to keep my options open, let's put it that way. And it was just, it was a process of finding that ending, yeah.
What I like about it was the ambiguity. It's not so clear, are the teachers right or wrong? They're not wrong, but they're also not right. How did you feel about making sure that it wasn't so black and white?
I mean, when you have ambiguity, it's always a good thing especially for your actors, because every actor has a point, and the character has a point, and they can and I like those gray zones. There's those gray areas in films where you don't know who's right and who's wrong. And whenever I get a feeling of a constellation, of a dynamic of that kind, I know it's a good story.
What I loved is that she never stops wanting to help, like to reach the student. That was my favorite thing about it. Like, she always wanted to help the students, even beyond everything she was going through. Was that important for you, making sure that she was still driven by the desire to teach and reach the students?
Definitely, because I think there is something moving about a person who wants to pass on something, who really wants to, I think, and I have tremendous respect for this, for everybody who picks up that profession, because it's you shape the future, right? And I think we ought to value what they do much higher because they're overworked, they're underpaid, and they have to put up with so much stress and pressure that we just wanted to show that to bow in front of these people.
Well, thank you so much, and good luck tonight and at the Oscars. No, for you, because it's such a personal story based on your life. What was it for the challenge of kind of like being objective enough to tell the story, but also it's personal?
As a filmmaker, as a director, you really have to find that separation, and it was hard. It was hard. Sometimes I would kind of go back into the memories, and it was mostly because the performances on set felt so real. My actors just brought such an incredible depth of work to their performances, and so it was a bit of a dance of like, this being my story, but also wanting to make the best film, like the most cinematic version of it, rather than being true to what really happened, because that really doesn't matter. So for me, the film is very much an emotionally autobiographical film, but yeah, there's a lot of fiction in it.
What was the most challenging scene to direct then?
Anything with the father in the film, and I know that the film is getting released on March 1st, so I'm sure the audiences will get a sense of why when they see it.
What was your initial reaction when you first read the script of your episode?
When I read the script, I loved it. I love both. I did 2 episodes. The one I was nominated for was the second one. It was number 6 of the series, and I loved it, and I hope that I would be able to do it justice and not mess it up.
Well, we're talking about serious topics about police brutality and stuff like that. How did you go approach doing covering that topic in such a sensitive way?
To me, if we were to, and I said this to the actors, I said this also to the showrunner, Lee Eisenberg, if we're going to explore Black pain, that we have to humanize it, and there has to be a reason, and we have to make it hurt. So my approach was to really, I talked to a historian, and I did a lot of research as far as what the real protest would have been and what it would feel like and what it would look like and what historically would have taken place. And then talked to the actors, talked to the crew, and then they had to talk to the stunt guys, because the stunt guys wanted to be very ginger. And I was like, no, that's not how they were. That's not how the police were at that time. And we added, and everybody wanted to just tell the truth, and everybody wanted to be faithful to that moment and portray the brutality of it, so that moment should feel bad and it should hurt and it should be triggering, and hopefully people will never want to recreate that moment ever again in reality.
And you're also covering the serious backstory with suicide. So how do you juxtapose that and wanted to cover that approach, that storyline?
The backstory is really important because it tells you everything about the main character. So it tells you why she's the way that she is, right? Bree's character is the way that she is. So one thing was dealing with the 1920s, which was great, but then also to deal with at that time. See, it's interesting because we dealt with civil rights, which was also tangled in with women's rights, but then gay rights, which wasn't even something that was talked about, but that's what her brother committed suicide over. So ultimately, the episode was about feeling equal no matter who you are, and the devastation of when you cannot feel equal or you cannot feel like you can be authentically who you are. So for me as a director, I always just try to tap into the heart of the character and what's going on. And when the way that I chose to film the suicide, I didn't want it to be gratuitous. I still wanted it to hurt. But leading up to the suicide, I wanted you to get a feeling for who this guy was, so that when he was gone, you felt the loss and the injustice of it.
So it seemed like the key for your director side is making sure people feel it emotionally instead of exploitively.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so one question. We have a lot of students, acting students. Brie Larson is a terrific actress. We all know it. But what does she do special? What is something she does maybe that you would say, you students should follow that? She does something, research. Is there something she does that's really special that you think would be a good trait for some of our acting students to think about?
She feels. I think she's very smart. She takes in the situation. She does her homework. She knows the character. And then she feels. And one of the things that I love about Brie is when we were on set, I would look, like something would come up just based on watching a first take, and I'd go, I'm feeling something. Let's go that way. Let's push it. And she'd go, okay. let's try it. And that was great. And that's the one thing that I loved about Bree is that she feels and she's free. And she's willing to try things. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. But you have to be willing to take that chance and to try pushing yourself to feel and to be emotionally open, because that's what really sells.
And even if it doesn't work, as a director's standpoint, whatever she's trying to do, theoretically it could lead to something else. Like another idea. Oh, that didn't work, but hey, what if we did that?
It doesn't work, it's just a take.
Right.
We do another take. It's not that big of a deal.
It's not like the old days with film, you know?
Yeah, no, but usually you find really lovely things. And sometimes we go, that doesn't work, but there's a point right here. Let's mix this with that, and that's why she's wonderful.
All right, so what inspired you to want to take on a story about 10th graders in a songwriting competition?
Well, it was a really hard time for young people. There was a report that came out, there was an epidemic of sadness and loneliness among young people, and I thought, well, how can we look at this? It was hard times. They had come back after the pandemic, had a lot of losses. And I discovered a school where they were creating original songs. And it was a beautiful story that became about healing. It came about the healing power of music. And that made me feel like, okay, there's some joy here, there's some optimism, and this would be a good film that we could all use.
For you, because I was thinking about that, because kids coming out of COVID, I can't imagine being in school dealing with, it was hard enough for you and I, imagine a child. How was it kind of like sharing that journey with them, actually finding a way for music and art to heal them?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I mean, as I watched them taking their masks off, becoming more together as a group, sharing creative inspiration, making music together, there was something healing about that. And also, I felt also a great sense of, relief. Like, okay, the pandemic is really receding. We can come together, we can be together as a group and experience joy. So for me, it was also healing.
Well, if you think about it, because generationally, a lot of generations didn't mix. The kids stayed with kids online. It must have been nice kind of like with the crew, even the crew interacting with the kids.
Absolutely, no, absolutely. And I think these kids, kids feel the stresses in the world. They really feel them acutely, even though we like to protect our children. I think they really feel the hard times. And so in this film, it just shows if you give them a little extra, you give them a little bit of joy, you give them a little bit of happiness, it goes a long way.
What drew you to want to tell a story about families trying to flee North Korea?
It was really when I sort of discovered hidden camera footage from inside North Korea that gave me a feeling of life inside North Korea for your average person, and at the same time the absence of any voices of the people of North Korea in our world, because we really don't see actual people inside North Korea in our news. We only hear about the missiles and the political side of it. Sorry. And so that was it. I really felt like, my God, this country has been around for more than 70 years, and there's 26 million people there, and we have not heard from them, and they deserve to be heard from. And that was really the initial impetus.
Now, obviously, they're internment camps, really concentration camps. Most Americans don't know anything about that. How was it be able to explore that through the eyes of people that are actually victims of it?
It was the most emotional, meaningful, mind-boggling, mind-blowing, transformative experience, really, of my life and my career. Because, yes, that is exactly what we did. I mean, we became very close to many North Koreans and followed them very closely, and to, feel through them what they had lived through, what their lives were like, what their country was like, was something that, we all should be aware of, because people inside North Korea really can't advocate for themselves, and we should, on the outside, help as much as possible, and that was the impetus, yeah.
What was your initial reaction when you read the script to the finale episode?
I was knocked out by it first, and then I was like, how are we going to do this? Huge concert venues, back and forth in different time periods, remembering all of the things that have happened in every other episode up until now. It was a Megillah, but we got it done.
And what was the process like with Riley to kind of wrap up her season arc?
She is the easiest, breeziest, dreamiest actor that any director could hope for. She's prepared, she's committed, she's incredibly talented.